No, I got it.
Yeah, that's look where you're at. You know,
They make one.
it's such to start some days and I have to be like, oh, wait a minute. Oh yeah, well, there you go. Guns N' Roses was like that. We saw our first reunion tour. We called it Atlanta. And looking around, there were a couple kids. They were there with their parents who were our age or older.
Y'all might be down there at 7 o'clock by your
And everybody else is like,
You can handle it.
late 40s, early 50s. I was young looking at those. Like, I couldn't go to the concerts because there was Metallica going to It's like, what are you doing? I was 12 years old. They were going to do that.
Go to those concerts.
And you like that being
Well, not when you're young, but now, yeah. I mean, we were like 15 rows from the stage. You know, we went right home out of we were going to go party that night. We're like, okay, I'm done.
All you can hear for 2 days later. Okay. Call the meeting to order. Mr. Pope, you're up.
Alright. So we are here for another STR work session, hopefully
Last.
one of or the last work session. And the format of this presentation is a little different. There's no overview of all the things we have discussed. Instead, this is just purely, hopefully, an accurate or close to accurate summary of what happened at first reading and some proposed amendments that we discussed for second reading. So we're not rehashing the whole history, we're just looking at the version that passed first reading and some amendment language that, I've gotten my second bullet point was no additional changes, but of course, if you guys have any ideas or other changes, we can do those tonight. So the first slide, what I wanted to try to do is just track the language as it would be if you make the amendments, clean it up, got the red and the stripe so people can read it. And so the new definition of short-term rental, this would be how it reads, and there is an item C on the next page. But the idea here is that an ISTR would be for homes that are not legal residences, that are rented for as many nights in the year as they can be. There's no 72-night limit. I'm going to talk about that in a second on the next slide. Or it's a residence, it's a license issued for a residence that's not anyone's legal residence and that was inherited from someone who owned it on February 7th, 2023. Or on the next page, on item C, medical hardship. And maybe actually split up inheritance and hardship. But there is an item C coming later for medical hardship. So Wes, will you go to the next slide? So I wanted to try to put it together in some way that made sense so that later tonight during the meeting, if someone wanted to make a motion, the motion would be kind of orderly and we'd have the language here. So in order to do what we talked about last week, we would need to strike the definition of eligible family member because the ISTRs are now proposed at this moment to be anyone can inherit them, not just a family member. And that would also include striking item B3, the definition from the previous page, which references the eligible family member. And by striking item 3, you basically open up to anyone who inherits the property. And then amending the actual definition. And before I get to the yellow, Joe couldn't be here again tonight. He's still in recovery. But he did have a suggestion for this particular definition. And Mr. Lake Howard, if you're listening, thank you for emailing us last night. Before we get to the yellow, just the red there. The proposed definition, a license issued for a dwelling unit to be rented as a short-term rental for more than 72 nights annually. That was meant to capture that the unit could be rented for more than 72 nights annually. But the way it reads, if you have a dwelling unit that's not your legal residence that's rented for fewer than 72 nights annually, you wouldn't qualify for an ISTR. So Joe recommends striking the reference there to 72 nights annually. So it would be a license issued for a dwelling unit, and then A, B, C. A, B, and C. And another catch here, thank you to Joe for his careful reading. Between A, B, and C, there need to be ors. So A, B, and C are not and, it's or. So if you guys agree to it, an investment short-term rental license is a license issued for a dwelling unit, for the rental of a dwelling unit that's not the legal residence of the owner, or the rental of a dwelling unit through inheritance, or through medical hardship. And so the yellow here, I was just trying to capture what needed to be edited to make a motion that made sense. So the yellow is new language that wasn't in the first reading language. And Wes, over to the next, because Wes, I'm going to ask you to skip one more. Thanks. So here, highlighted in number 4. This was me. This was me trying to read the room and put something in here for you guys to react to and discuss tonight to make sure we captured everyone's intent. We talked about medical hardships. There was agreement that either failure to be able to perform the ADLs as certified by a doctor, or a lease or long-term contract for care could help you trigger that medical hardship. And then I added number 4 to try to capture the idea that medical hardships were to be granted for someone's, to help people keep their primary home. That was my editorial comment, so I put that in there for you guys to discuss and react to. So that's what I just want to make sure everyone sees that. That's new. That's for you guys to talk about and decide tonight whether to keep it or not keep it for second reading.
You want to talk now or you want to talk later?
Let's do it now, so that way later we'll know what to make the motions for.
I've talked to a couple of council people. I think we should take it out. I think the fact that you own a second home shouldn't disqualify you from applying for a hardship. It might be that you own a small house somewhere else, and with one spouse going in a hospital or extended care, the other spouse could move into the smaller house, control budgets, live for less, and make money on the ISTR to pay the medical bills, to pay the extended care. And I just, it's easy enough to work around, you know. Somebody could just take their second home, put in their kid's name, and then they technically qualify. So it's so easy to work around. It's an onus for our people to determine if you own property somewhere else. And we always talk about what about staff, and what all they're gonna have to do. And I think it would behoove us just to go ahead and take it out and not make people work around it, and not make staff have to follow up on it, and not to make people have to sell a second home just so that they can pay medical expenses that are already set at a high bar. I mean, the 2 bars we set were you had to lose 3 of life's functions or life's ADLS or whatever, or you had to have a contract with an assisted living. And I think it probably is better to do that without getting into such nitpicking things.
I'll say I agree with Mr. Folly. I'm not, if we were just talking about monetary hardships, that's one thing. When you talk about somebody having a stroke or somebody having a heart attack, unplanned items, I don't think number 4 should, I think we should take it out, personally.
Take it out.
Works. Get it.
Yeah, and I do agree that I think this kind of bleeds over from medical hardship to a financial hardship, which we all agree is a gray area we're not ready to address at this moment. So when we make that motion tonight, number 4 is not in the first reading draft, so no one has to move to strike it or anything. It would just be
Just
add the other
C.
highlighted things here, the or and the or up in the top of the definition. So the final definition of ISTR tonight would be a license issued for a dwelling unit that is not your primary residence or your legal residence, or was inherited from someone who owned it on February 2nd, 2023, or someone who can prove a medical hardship, which is either 3 ADLs or a long-term lease or care contract. Everyone comfortable with that definition? All right. So, one more slide, Wes. So, and to kind of go along with this, it's not explicitly clear, and this is another thing that I wanted to make sure I understood the will of council here, that these types of ISTR licenses are in addition to the cap, not part of the cap. So if you're applying through inheritance, you're not on the wait list, you get it by right, and even if we're at the cap, we'll issue you your inheritance or your hardship license. That was your guys' intent, this is where we can insert that.
Do we need to put in there that only one hardship per owner would be issued? So if somebody owns multiple pieces of property, you only get one bite at the hardship apple?
You know, right now, it's not, you're correct, there's no limit.
I think that's good language.
Well, does that interfere with what y'all just said as far as there were multiple houses, or,
No, I'm talking about getting a hardship ISTR.
right?
If you own multiple
I think,
properties.
I gotcha.
Just, you get
Just
one
So
hardship.
if you
One
have
per
multiple
family.
properties, you can
Yeah.
get,
What you're saying is one per family.
Right.
Not, you get one, I get one.
All
Mama
your
gets
nine
one,
kids,
yeah.
everything, yeah.
Yeah.
No, just,
All right, that would make a great replacement number 4 on the previous slide. Only one.
hardship ISTR per family,
Per owner.
per owner.
Thank you, Mr. Farley. All right, Wes, now to the 28-night minimum. So we're also contemplating a 28-night minimum rental period. So at the last meeting, we talked about that there are gonna be situations which prohibit people from renting their homes, non-voluntary situations which may take the home off the market for reasons beyond the owner's control. And if they didn't have the full year to rent, then they may have more difficulty meeting that four-week minimum. And so the two exceptions to that would be a natural disaster or other act of God, hurricane, earthquake, flood, fire, that keeps you out of it for more than 6 months. That's 6 months without a CO, is how we would use that standard. Or any work related to a valid building permit carried out to address issues identified by the building official. And that's important. If you're gonna go for this if you're really addressing life safety, health violations, you call the building official first, he comes in, makes an official determination, tells you have to make the repairs, then you permit them and carry them out. This comes up a lot of times in our 50% rule work for the flood zone. There are exceptions for certain repairs, but only if they're identified by the building official as necessary first. You can't come back after the fact and say, oh, that was bad wiring. So this adds an extra layer to make sure that anyone who is renovating for more than 6 months and they want to claim this exception, they're doing it basically because the city made them. They said, you know, this house doesn't meet this code, you can't have anybody in it. And then we give you 6 months to fix it.
it doesn't have to be, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I would say if someone was remodeling their home, they bought, let's say if they've got an older home that needs updating and they want to remodel it, but they have to close it down because they can't rent it, paint fumes or whatever, would that apply to this at all?
Well, I wrote it this way, they could call the building official and say, come tell me this home doesn't meet code. But if it's just they don't like beadboard and walnut
Right.
cabinets, then.
Yeah, I don't think a custom is like fixing up the interiors would qualify for this. I mean, you know, changing a cosmetic thing.
I was just concerned about, it had to be city initiated. I would like it to be where if I initiate, because the city might not tell me, your house is non-conforming, you have to raise it. I might initiate that conversation and
It's
say,
not so much that the city initiates it, it's that the city documents it beforehand.
I'm good with that.
So not necessarily that we made you do it, but you said, I want to do this, can you come in and prove that the things I'm doing are
Addressing
necessary?
safety, this, yeah.
Does that answer your question?
I mean, it's not the answer.
Cosmetic changes wouldn't stop you from renting for 28 days a year.
But
When I brought it up, I was thinking
let's
like
say
the
you want to
Mayor's
move a
Cave
wall,
fiasco.
you know, you want to, you know, take a bedroom out,
Yeah.
you know, make it instead of a 5-bedroom, you'll make it a 4-bedroom.
And you better get you a good contractor so you ain't tied up.
I don't know, this doesn't really.
I'm saying you couldn't rent your house if you're doing construction on the house, is what I'm saying,
Right?
internally or externally.
But,
Right.
but what this addresses is non-voluntary work.
Right, I know
So,
that,
so
I'm
if
aware
you
of
volunteer to do it, then you better do it when you don't have your house rented. You'll have periods of
it.
time.
But what if
when
it
you
takes a
have-
year or more?
If
to-
it takes a year or more, then you're
Would you
doing more
lose your
than,
license, I guess is what I'm asking.
well, you're doing more than just a little bit of
can't
cosmetic.
fulfill-
Here's the thing
28
about it,
minimum.
no HOA ran places, or the property owner, it's not voluntary to them. The board has a meeting and boom, you gotta do what they say.
Just
And
cover
my-
that.
My real, okay, cause my real life experience was I couldn't rent for 4 months.
We got that.
Yeah, that's covered.
That's covered in here, Eddie.
Okay.
Willing cosmetic work is not.
Yeah.
But to Mr. Ellison's point, this sets a 6 month, so if you were out of unit for 5.5 months, you wouldn't get the exception. This says 6 months or more.
You know, I couldn't rent from Memorial Day until October, and really, even though the work was finished, it wasn't signed off. You didn't want to have renters in there until the company signs off.
If it wasn't signed off, then I would count on your time.
Yeah, I mean,
And this is just to avoid the 28 night minimum. If you can still have 28 nights, then you keep your license. This is just saying if someone forces you for at least 6 months to not, then that exception that rule doesn't
And
apply.
your,
That's
and
all.
your license would not be affected by this ordinance.
But if somebody
that's
wants
right.
to remodel their home, and it would, let's say they've remodeled their house, and 6 months in, they discover they've got bad plumbing, and they gotta replumb the whole thing now. It's gonna take another 6 months. Would they be able to keep their license? Now, they're gonna lose a rental, I get that. But when the loop comes around in March or May, would they be able to reapply if they don't have one and they don't have a?
The way this sets,
CO.
the way this sets is you would not.
Right, but can we not do that to where
Well, I think.
it's voluntary versus a,
Except
I
that once
think
you
what-
found out.
I think if you were 8 months into, well, 8, if you were 6 months into a voluntary project and then you found.
Termites.
Termites.
Yeah.
A safety, health
Which
concern.
happens.
And then
But
the
then
city
that
came.
would
Right, mold,
Yeah, then
whatever.
the city came in and documented and added 6 months, the extra.
but what if
6
they
months
just,
wouldn't count against
yeah,
you.
but what if it's, I don't know, something that's,
If you just decide you wanna do something, it don't cover it.
well, that's what I'm saying.
If
Can we
if
not
it's
do
a
that?
code violation, it has to be fixed, or a
Can we
life
not
safety
change it?
violation.
Can we not change it to,
But going to your
Voluntary?
argument, if they find termites or structural damage, then the clock.
well, I get that, but
But I mean, I think we're covering 99% of it. I don't.
No,
So
he
to-
just wants to change to cover
there's
it.
a lot
I
of
just
old,
decided
there's a
I
lot of
wanna
old
do
shacks out
So,
there that
Mr.
need.
Grooms, do you have a little, just so I can understand exactly what you might propose?
I would propose just take it out, if you do any renovations that would exceed the time to where you couldn't get a CO, you know, that you would have to wait till you have a CO, but you wouldn't lose your license, is what I'm saying.
If you don't have a CO, I think Mr. Groom's is saying is if you lose your CO for more than 6 months, you get a pass, whether it was because you want to wallpaper everything and it takes you 8 months to do it, or whatever you want to do. But if you're without a CO and no one's living in that house, even you are not living in that house for more than 6 months, then you get a pass till the next year.
I don't think so, because that's a voluntary choice. It's not what we started out saying, you didn't have a
But
choice.
it makes the community, it makes the houses better. I mean, you've got 80% of the houses
Not
are,
necessarily.
Not, yeah.
well,
I've
but
seen
it
a lot of
could.
remodels that are horrible.
Okay.
And Eric won't be back for the meeting. Wallpaper or new cabinets aren't gonna make you lose your CO. The house has to be uninhabitable because it doesn't have water, it doesn't have. septic,
Right,
it doesn't-
but-
If you want to wallpaper and paint, you're not going to lose 6 months. You're not going to lose the ability. This is a 28 night minimum. That's it. It's not talking about if you can't rent for 6 months, you lose your license. That's just a way to avoid the 28 night minimum. So if you're wallpapering your house, if you can't get it done in 11 and a half months to where you can't rent for 28 days, you're in the wrong. You messed up. You hired the wrong person. You did dilly-dally, whatever the case is. You can't tell me the wallpaper in any house out here is going to take you 11 and a half months.
The real deal is if you're gonna do something that takes more than 6 months and you can't find something in that repair that has to do with health or safety,
You better break it up and
Do
do
it
it
in
in two
pieces,
stages.
like everybody else. I'd love to do 100 things in the off season, but I do 2 or 3, and the next year I do 2 or 3, and it's just what you got time for. Come on, people.
I think that was the spirit of it, is,
So, so Mr. Ellis, just so that I can bring closure, since, you know, I do live in an HOA and I've gotten a lot of feedback about this. So we're fine then, we've covered that previously, so we don't need to worry about that.
No, because, I mean, what I'm talking about is, I lived in my unit the whole time, but I wouldn't have been able to rent it. In good conscience, I heard across the street there were some people showing up that weren't told what the condition was, but, you know, the Mariners K project was extensive. I mean, they had like 30 guys on site every day and several stuff, and this went on from Memorial Day through Labor Day. And the off-season is harder to get rentals.
I would tell my HOA to start at different dates.
But
But then again, that's covered in here for those kind of processes. And like I said, your license wouldn't have been affected anyway.
Well, yeah, because it was a 72, but I guess if you ever run into it again, the people that it affects,
But it's covered.
we know that they'll come up
Where's
here and,
where's the HOA thing? Would that be in this?
I mean, it would be work related to a valid permit carried, and just, again, trying to narrow it down, it is tied to the building official documenting the work as for some code violation. So when found the green one right here, Pavilion Watch got shut down because they needed to
Yeah.
redo all their exterior stairs, that would count. If the HOA says we're changing from a metal roof to a shingle roof for aesthetic purposes, that wouldn't count. So the HOA, I mean, if the work the HOA orders, the valid permit would cover all of it, if it's related to a life safety health violation. That was to make it as narrow as possible. But if the HOA just says we want to replace all the windows,
Or paint the place
and it
yellow.
takes 8 months, that would not be covered by that.
But that would be one, but again, that would be one unit at a time. So as you move down 2 units down the road, if you wanted to rent, you could rent it. Because if you could live there coming and going, that means they got it safe enough for people to access it.
I see Eddie's point, but 28 days is not a terrible amount to.
Hmm?
If you wanted more wiggle room, you could change 6 months to 2 months. If you wanted even more wiggle room, you could strike out, carry out to address life safety, health violations. But I tried to write it out as narrow as possible.
Well, guys, I think we've been through this about 47 different times, so it's time to, you know, cut bait or fish.
I'm okay with those.
So then just to re-reference that later on in 117.03, we'd also need to add that highlighted language in 117.03, which says that to be in good standing, you have to meet the minimum 90.
Yes, sir.
So were there any second reading amendments that you guys don't see or would like to discuss?
There was, I think I was in the minority of it for the 10-day grace not being retroactive or being retroactive.
Right now, there's no retroactivity written into the draft, into the first
So
reading.
I'd be in favor of making it retroactive for anybody who actually applied within 10 days after the deadline last year.
We could do that.
But the criteria would be, they had to apply within 10 days and they actually had to
apply at that time.
apply.
Not after.
Not, I could have applied, but they had to have applied. And we should have a handle on that number.
There's only one that applied and was denied an appeal.
So a 10-day retroactive to last year for anyone who applied within 10 days last year.
I'd be okay with that.
And that would come under 117.
Which one is it?
So the definition of good standing past the 10 business day after the final day of the previous year.
So which one is that,
Which one is that?
117 what?
Sorry. So 117.01 in the definitions, right below eligible family members, there's a definition of good standing. It's also referenced again in 117.03 on page 7, 117.03 4A, and that needs to be updated to 10 days to 14 days. And I think that's where you would write in the exception.
I don't know, I don't know if such an exception, because we're only talking about one, and we're talking about had to apply within 10 days, that couldn't be a policy interpretation.
It looks like
And
we have
not-
about a 4-minute break before the regular meeting. If we adjourn, I can
Get clarity.
call, and use my lifeline.
All right.
Call Jack.
Go use your lifeline.
Work session.
You have one lifeline call.
So we're
We'll be
adjourned.
back in 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Yeah, Jack, man, Jack's hilarious. Action Jackson, something else. Don't know if his name was Action Jackson, man, it was just all over the place. It was so much fun. Jack.
Oh.